Serious, nurses and doctors of Reddit, what's your weirdest/scariest paranormal stories that took place during work? A ward I worked on once had a patient who was a psychic/medium as a patient. We had a bit of a laugh with her as she was on the ward for a while. She'd had a stroke, which affected her mobility, and she would do readings for the staff, etc. from time to time. I took it all as just a bit of fun until one evening when she pressed her nurse call buzzer and told us to go check on a patient in a side room as he was dead. We went to check and sure enough found that the gentleman had died. Later on, we asked our psychic patient how she had known, and she told us she had seen him coming out of his room obviously distressed. She realized he had died and had to explain to him what had happened and help him to pass over/go to the light now. I am not a believer, but that gave me the creeps. I was working at night and one of the patients died while I was in the room. We tried everything to revive this person, but it didn't work, so after doing the papers and everything I went to another place in the hospital, and I swear to GD that this patient who I saw dead touched my right arm. I think that I have never cried that much in my life. Maybe it was their way of saying thanks for trying. That's a very sweet thought. My brother-in-law's son, sister's stepson, was in a bad accident. We had gathered at the ICU before he passed, and I went in with my sister and her 2 kids. They fell apart seeing their brother in such a bad state. They had already made the decision to take him off life support. Now they were letting family in before he died. My niece and nephew didn't want to go to his side. I brought them forward and told them this was the last time they would see him and the only chance to say goodbye. I was crying a little bit myself. I had to bring them up this bedside. Later that night after he passed, I was driving home, and as clear as if he were sitting right next to me, I heard him thank me. I told him he was welcome. My grandpa was doing really bad. He was in a home. All of the family came at once to see him. A few of us stayed longer and were by his bed when he passed. My cousin, who was on her way home with her son, called us to see how he was doing moments after he passed because her little boy said, "It's okay, mommy. Grandpa great is with daddy now." My cousin's husband passed away 2 years prior. Perhaps this was due to sleep deprivation during your night shift? Something similar to a copyright JVU, where your brain is too slow to keep up with some information, making you process after-event hallucinations. I've seen weird things when sleep deprived, and I think seeing someone die and not be able to process it in real time might trigger some weird effects for me. I worked in a pediatric hospital and had always heard that the 4th floor right outside our oncology unit was haunted. I worked 3/12s normally, but would pick up overtime and picked up a night shift. I was working in the NICU, which happened to also be on the 4th floor, but on the opposite side. The oncology unit had a staircase that was a shortcut down to the cafeteria, which was on the 2nd floor. At about 3 a.m., I was ready to take a short break and wanted a cup of coffee from the cafeteria, so I decided to take that staircase. I walked through the automatic double doors and saw a kid skipping down the hall. I called out to him as I was afraid a little kid had snuck out of a patient room. As soon as I called out to him, he turned and in the blink of an eye totally vanished. A lot of other nurses and docs had seen the same little kid skipping in that same hallway. Of course, I chalked it up to just exhaustion and didn't really think about it much after that. But you are and sure I didn't use that hallway at night ever again. There is probably some medical explanation for this, but still the weirdest thing I've seen as a nurse so far. We had a very robust, confused old lady on our floor. Her room was in front of the nurse's station, so we could keep an eye on her, and had one of our nurse's aides as a sitter too. She was always fighting, kicking, trying to get out of bed, very restless and agitated, as some patients I've had before can get before death. One day we were called into the room as her heart rate was going down and she lay still with her eyes open. It was 30/20 then. Flatlined. We checked for a pulse and did not find any. She was a DNR, so we did not attempt resuscitation. We close her eyes, prepare to get the body bag and call the family. The sitter remains in there to start getting the body ready. Less than 10 minutes later, she calls us back in. The old lady is at it again, hitting, kicking, trying to get out of the bed. She came back to life. Honestly, we found the situation hilarious, and I still have never seen any patient come back like that on their own. I think she made it out of the hospital too. Did a rotation in a burn unit. There are tons of stories that go around, but I'll share my favorite. A pimp lit one of his prostitutes on fire, and she immediately bear hugged him, causing them to both suffer pretty severe injuries. Unfortunately, hers included an inhalation burn. They both were being treated in the same ICU, but on opposite ends. Weeks later, she ends up coding and passes away. And after about 30 minutes, as things start to quiet down, the guy starts screaming from his room, "Get her out. Get the GDDNBH out of my room." I used to work in a nursing home as both a CNA and an LPN, and while nothing too crazy happened, there were definitely things that happened out of the ordinary. I remember one time after someone had died, I was cleaning up her body, and the door to the room swung wide open even though it had been firmly latched. Nobody was there. It gave me the creeps. There were instances of furniture being moved, lights turning on and off by themselves, and toilets randomly flushing by themselves as well. I also remember I had one resident one night who asked me to make sure I closed the door to the closet that was at the end of her bed, and she told me that when it was open that woman kept going in and out of it all night and it kept her awake. When I worked at the funeral home, I was told a story about an elderly lady that had died. The husband said he wanted her to be buried with her ring, as she never took it off. My coworker was in the morgue and was washing the body. She removed the ring to mark it down on the paperwork. As soon as she did, a styrofoam head they used for wigs went flying across the room. She just said out loud, all right, I'll put your ring back on. No more disturbances." Worked in a nursing home / long-term facility for multiple years. Personally hadn't experienced anything too crazy apart from mystery call lights, call bell system going off, no buttons lit up, no rooms lit up. System would have to be reset from the electrical room to clear it. Hearing doors close shut, toilets flushing, faucets running. These were by no means commonplace. Other staff had some more direct experiences though. Apparently in one hall, a little girl would occasionally be seen walking. This had been reported by multiple staff as well as patients. A staff member was sitting out in her car during night shift when some woman who knocked on her window and quickly disappeared. The next day she was discussing this out loud with the oncoming shift when someone pulled out a picture from old files based on the description provided. Apparently, it was a match to a former patient that had passed away at least 10 years before that staff member was hired. My mom worked at a hospital in our town that shut down around 15 years ago. They were having a sort of farewell party with all the staff. She, my sister, and I took a walk around at the end to take a last look. We went to the 4th floor and were the only people up there. Small hospital. Easy to tell. As we're walking down the hallway, we hear footsteps that sounded like men's dress shoes walking next to us, louder and different than all our sneakers. When we stopped, the footsteps kept going down the hall. Once they got down the hall, the emergency light and alarm over the room started sounding. My mom went over and couldn't turn it off because the system was disconnected / turned off. I think she tried really hard to keep it together for us because all she said was, that's weird, this whole system is already off. But I do remember us noping to the elevator right after that. When we got in the elevator, the button for the ground floor was pushed already. Easy to explain away as some other kid pushing all the buttons, but still weird given the circumstances. I'm a nurse. I've witnessed quite a lot with Alzheimer people. They often develop their own scenarios in their own head, often accompanied by vivid hallucinations. Once, during night shift, I heard a woman scream in fear. Checking on her, she managed to climb into her wheelchair in pure panic, wanting to flee her bedroom, asking what was wrong. She thought the building was on fire now. What's important to mention here is, people often make claims that people are just crazy or dreaming badly or something, but this is not the case. People with hallucinations have been found to actually see, hear, smell, etc. something when their hallucinations occur, as the same locations in the brain are stimulated as if they would get real impulses. That woman actually saw fire. She actually smelled fire. She didn't just make that up to be crazy. It's what her brain told her was happening. And she was in real panic for her life. And the same applies to when those people see someone else in their room, when they want me to guide someone out of the bedroom who isn't actually there, seemingly standing right behind me, and it makes no sense to discuss with them that no one's there to them, someone is there, and you better do your best effort of improvising to guide that someone, even if it's no one outside. Play along and they'll be fine. This, to me, is the scariest thing at work. They see something you don't. I've worked in a small family-run nursing home for 6 years as a nurse aide. It was an orphanage before it became a nursing home. And unfortunately, before being shut down, the orphanage had a history of severe abuse and neglect. Unfortunately, it's not gossip. The owner herself has told us, when residents get close to death, they always see a little girl. One of my patients, a very alert gentleman, he knew all our names and was very alert and oriented. I was passing dinner trays and saw that he had his back turned and was talking and laughing in the corner. I knocked and asked him who he was talking to, and he chucked and said, "This little girl came into my room. She was scared." He died 3 days later. About 6 months later, had another patient screaming about a little girl grabbing his feet, and she needed to leave him alone. He died that night. She's come up over the years. It's always the same thing. They see her and then they die. Other co-workers have had the same experience. It's very unsettling edit. Sorry for grammar errors. Something I've always struggled with and am working on it. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notification. See you on another video. Bye.